What's up, Internet? You're tuned into episode 131 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where an assortment of best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford
Hello, hello.
and Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
We're back. We're back, everybody. The the
The-
the the, the three musketeers are back.
The Greasome threesome. I don't know what Greasome means. I've made that word up.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah, it wasn't
Greasome.
Think for
good.
yourself. My skin's
I-
perfect.
I appreciate the spirit of that, but that was, they can't all be winners, Max. I appreciate all the
No.
shots you take though.
99.99% is a fair amount. Can I quickly grab the front of the show with some huge news for you here, Pete?
Sure.
Just happened.
Yeah.
The official Multiversus X account has posted its first update in over 8 months. Means it
Breaking
could be
news,
launching
everybody!
soon.
What'd they
Breaking
post?
news. I've no idea. Probably
also-
absolutely nothing.
It's also 25
1,
years
2,
since
3.
it's 25 years since Pepsi Man as well. So that's another celebration for the day.
It's a really big day.
This is a big day. They testing 1, 2, 3 is what they posted. So you'll probably be able to play that game that you bought 2 years ago. And
Oh
then
yeah, it's
could
not the one in
play.
beta.
That's the one that was
they're
in beta.
testing still. Okay.
They took it away. Remember they took the game away, and then Pete
That's all they
paid for the
got for me.
game, and then
That's
he
all they
couldn't
got.
do
They
it.
come back and
Yeah.
they say, "Hey, we're testing." Okay, great.
They took the
I
game away.
I found out. Apparently, I paid to be a part of the testing. That's what I learned about that. So, bring my game back, everybody.
It's
Okay,
coming
that's
back.
fine.
Do you trust Warner now? Now that they're getting out of the AAA game space, this is a live service game, I guess.
Here's the
so.
thing: this is a live service game. This is the type
Yeah.
of game they say they're going to double down on, Steve. So maybe this game gets some support. We'll see what happens.
Be nice.
But here's the thing. I don't want to talk about that because the last couple weeks, Steve, Max, it's been a lot of doom and gloom. 2024,
Really doom and gloom.
tough start to the year for the industry. A lot of hard times already, and it's only March. So Steve pulled together a bunch of real feel good stories here today. One that we're going to end on is, we'll see what happens. It's still developing, but it feels like it's hopefully moving towards a good resolution. But most of these stories guaranteed to give you a good vibe. So I'm pleased to have some good news to report on this year so far. And we're going to start off with one that I'm very personally excited about, which is Toys for Bob has announced that they are going independent. They announced this over on a blog post over on toysforbob.com titled "We're Going Indie," saying, "We're thrilled to announce that Toys for Bob is spinning off as an independent game development studio." They talk a little bit about some of the games that they've worked on in the past and kind of their legacy and history of making, high quality, family friendly games, right?
There's family-friendly games such as Call of Duty Warzone, yeah.
Well,
They just helped. They didn't make it. They were just helping.
yeah, come on, give them, Steve.
They were just
all right?
following
It's
orders,
literally
Steve.
It's number 3 in their recent games list on their
Yeah.
homepage.
Well,
So,
they did work on it. It's give them, but we're getting a return to form here, right? So
possibly.
well, that's what it sounds like anyway. They say, with the same enthusiasm and passion, we believe that now is the time to take the studio and our future games to the next level. This opportunity allows us to return to our roots of being a small and nimble studio. And then jumping around a little bit, they say, to make this news even more exciting, we're exploring a possible partnership between our studio and Microsoft. And while we're in the early days of developing our next new game and a ways away from making any announcements, our team is excited to develop new stories, new characters, and new gameplay experiences. Our friends at Activision and Microsoft have been extremely supportive of our new direction, and we're confident that we will continue to work closely as part of our future.
Small and nimble is how I describe myself all the time. This is good news because there were stories from like the week before last that Toys for Bob were that their offices were being closed and that the company was being sort of downsized, and people were worried this means the company was going to be shut down. We know that Wumper League, which I think was one of the last things they worked on, that has sort of ceased development now. That game is over. So I think people were a bit like, what's going to happen to Toys for Bob? It's been a shame to see them sort of like they worked really hard on Need for Speed and on Crash 4. Then they sort of got demoted and taken away from things, and they became like a Blizzard sort of like help studio. They got sort of blended in with like Overwatch, Call of Duty, stuff like that. Huge shame. Activision Blizzard, should say. So to now see this is such a like unexpected flip in the other direction. Great. I'm really glad. I hope they make Spyro 4. That's all I want from them is Spyro 4.
Me too, man.
Um,
Me too.
Stop making Crash Bandicoot games because Crash Bandicoot is trash Bandicoot, whereas Spyro is
Look, all right, look,
good.
look, look. Hey, we're not here for negativity today. I don't want to
Yeah,
relitigate old beef smacks today. We both like Spyro. Let's focus on that. All right, because I'm more a Spyro guy than a Crash guy. I'm with you on that. All right, so
good. All right, fine.
let's focus on common ground today. Okay,
Yeah.
because for
Steve, where do
me,
you land on this?
I think they should bring back Skylanders. That's where I land on it.
get
Nah,
out
do
of
you know
here.
what? Let's
Get
not
out of
have this
here. There's
conversation
always
anymore. Back
one.
to Spyro. Back to
There's always
Spyro.
No,
one.
the
There's always
game I
one.
want them to make is Disney Skate Adventure 2 because the first one was a banger.
You made that up.
What do you mean? No, I did not make that up. That game is
Disney.
phenomenal.
Seriously, Googling. Just wait until you watch Simba riding a skateboard. It's gonna change your life.
Honestly, no, Buzz Lightyear was the best. Disney's
Oh, I've just seen
Extreme Skate
Woody
Adventure.
suits a skateboard. The way he
It's
like
so
is
good.
leaning on
It's
it
so
like that.
good.
I just did a little teapot. Oh, that actually does look fun.
Yeah, they should
Pumbaa.
bring that back.
I'm not gonna
Oh,
The
lie and say that
problem
that
is,
wasn't a fun game, but
yeah, the problem is that's going to be a Fortnite mode, isn't it? If Disney ever makes that, it's just going to be another Fortnite mode where you can like go skateboarding in the
you
metaverse.
gotta
yeah.
stop. What did I say? What did I say? We're positive,
Good news, good news. Sorry, very good
okay?
news.
Sorry, yeah. Good
Because here's
news.
what's gonna happen, Steve. They're gonna make a new Tony Hawk game and save skateboarding
No, they're going to
games.
revive Vicarious
It's gonna be
Visions for
great.
that. They're gonna do
Yeah, they
that.
are. Yeah, that's what's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen. All right. It's gonna be fine. But see now, and
Mhm.
I want to ask that question because Max, you alluded to the rumors that were going on a couple weeks back about potential studio closure, for Toys for Bob. Now we have the announcement that they've gone independent. I am interested in what the story is behind the story here, right? Like, is this a did the news that those studios were closing down happen because this decision had already been made and facilities that are owned by Microsoft are winding down and they're moving into a new facility or maybe going remote for a while or whatever, right? Or is this a situation where, Xbox was maybe looking to clean up house as they're acquiring more and more of these studios? You have this studio that had its identity changed, that maybe lost a bunch of talent after that. And were they maybe thinking of closing them down? I'm interested in, I guess, like what was the impetus behind this decision? Did Toys for
Mm.
Bob recognize this was an opportunity for them to break away and go independent again, like we've seen studios like IO do, right, with Square, where it was kind of like, hey, this isn't working out for either of us? Or is this a situation where, oh, we're gonna close you down. Hey, can we go independent instead? Like I
Like,
wonder.
it's really difficult for me to read because they're partnering with Microsoft on the next game. So it's
Yeah.
like, if you're exploring a partnership with Microsoft to publish your next game or build your next game, maybe that's because they need the IP that Microsoft owns in order to make the game they want to make. Because I presume Toys for Bob aren't going to take Crash Bandicoot and Spyro with them when they go independent. That's going to
Yeah,
be
of course not, right?
ownership's going to be retained by Microsoft or Activision in that case. So if they want to work on that, they're going to have to partner up. Um, so I don't know, why would Microsoft, if they're going to work with the studio, say we don't want you, we're going to close you down?
I mean, because it is
Um,
different than like there is a different cost associated with funding a game than running a studio,
mhm.
right? And like I'm not saying that Microsoft doesn't have the money to do it or that they wouldn't be in the business of wanting to run a studio like that and make those kind of games because I think they would. But
It feels like this is who they needed in their roster, though. They
yeah,
don't have those family-friendly titles for
we've been
Game Pass
saying
that
like
people
that.
know about. And Toys for Bob leaving and going independent doesn't feel like a positive for Microsoft.
No. It
No,
feels
but
like the decision that they've made and that Microsoft has had to begrudgingly sort of go along with, and I think maybe that's why when
yeah,
they say, "Well, we'd quite like to work on your stuff still," Microsoft's gone, "Yeah, okay, cool." As much as they would have maybe liked to have kept them, it
yeah, because
probably maybe because they were feeling like they wanted to do something that, Blizzard, Activision weren't letting them do, and even as a part of Microsoft, they still were gonna be an assistant team. They were gonna be a team that could only really work on Call of Duty and sort of help the other teams out, whereas they were like, "No, we wanna do our own thing, so we're gonna go and do that." And maybe Microsoft was like, "Okay, cool, now you don't have to go through." I know they own Blizzard and Activision, there's probably still sort of too wrapped up, there's probably too much red tape preventing them from doing that. Maybe this just sort of like frees them up while also allowing them to sort of work on the IP they want to work on. But I'm speculating entirely. So
I mean, they specifically mention here, right? Like developing new stories, new characters, and new gameplay experiences. And I think, you know, if you have the ability as a studio and like you have the capital and like the buy-in from your talent that you want to go independent, you want to control your future, and you can make a deal with Microsoft where you can have a development partnership there. I mean, I don't really see a downside, right? Because if we thought, Toys for Bob, perfect candidate, obviously to make a new Spyro game, to make a new Crash game if they want to make a Crash 5. But like also we talked about like it would be great to see them revive Banjo. It would be great to, see them bring some of that talent to some of the other IP that Microsoft already owns that's been laying dormant. And, there's no reason they couldn't do all of those things and make an original IP that Microsoft doesn't own, right? And, even if they let Microsoft publish it, right? Like they could retain that ownership and,
Mhm.
start investing in the future of the company beyond, whatever projects Microsoft is willing to greenlight, right? And it gives them a little bit more control in the relationship. And I can see why you would want to do that if you have the resources, right? Like I think most of the studios that look to get acquired are because, like I think of somebody like Double Fine, right? Where it's like or Obsidian that was in a constant state of like struggling to get their next project funded. And I think, I could see a studio with that amount of clout and the type of legendary developers that have been there that can like get a game like Pentiment or something like that approved, right? Whereas maybe like Toys for Bob is like, yeah, like yeah, we would love to work on the next Spyro, but we also want to make original stuff. And it's like that's a harder thing to sell than it is to get to work on an IP that's already established that you already know they can make a hit in. So I don't know. Like I think you're probably right, Max, that it is probably like Toys for Bob made this decision and Microsoft decided that, rather than force the issue, that it would be easier to like let them go their own way and then
Mhm.
make a a publishing agreement to still leverage the talent the way that they planned on leveraging it anyway. And then everybody wins, right? And I mean, like, who knows if the market turns, if Toys for Bob doesn't start there, I'm sure Microsoft could come in and buy them again if that was something that made sense, right? Like, it's not like they don't have the money. So it's like, I feel like Microsoft probably doesn't stand to lose much if they're, it's like, yeah, like
No.
those games, like they're bringing games multi-platform anyway. They could still pay to make those games day and date on Game Pass. They can still pay to have an association with Xbox, and it would still cost them less than running a studio, right? So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. So you think it's Xbox's side then? Because there is a lot of risk involved for Toys for Bob. They've other than Skylanders, they've not worked on their own IP since 1999 by the looks of it, and maybe 1998. It's a long time
yeah,
to
Would you call Skylanders our own IP? Considering I guess it is. It was
it
just
was
like they
built. It
used
was
Sonic
built with
to
like Spyro, like as part of the
Spyro, not Sonic.
branding, but they
Mhm.
created Skylanders, though. I would say it's an
Okay.
original IP. Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, I'm not concerned about it because I mean, like, when you look at their track record, like, yeah, like Skylanders is like their last big original IP, but like Skylanders was a huge hit. It like kicked off the whole Toys to Life craze that like you saw a bunch of people flock to and imitate. They made a lot of really successful games in that series. They were really popular with kids. They spun off a bunch of cartoons and stuff. And like that IP shows like I think the depth of creativity that they had of how many characters they had to create,
Mhm.
to keep supporting it and everything. Yeah, I mean, to me, like definitely, I definitely think they're a studio that's capable of churning out something else that's that big a deal and that they own it themselves. Like, imagine if they had owned Skylanders, right? And like they were able to like make all the money that Skylanders made
Yeah,
rather than
yeah.
it going to their parent
I mean,
company.
the risk comes if they make a flop, right? They don't they're
Yeah,
not like Double Fine, for example, who now have the backing of Microsoft behind them.
right.
They can make a flop and it's like, "Oh, well, okay, on to the next thing," you know? Because as great as Psychonauts 2 was, I don't think it was a mass commercial success that it
No,
probably
but
would
I think
need to
that's the
be.
thing, right? Is like I feel like that's why a studio like Double Fine wants to get acquired is like their games are critically successful but don't sell a ton of copies. But like that's not Toys for Bob's problem, right? Like every game that they've made that you can point to like in recent memory is a hit, right? Like
Mhm.
the remakes that they made sold really well. And just because they're remakes, I don't think that that means anything. Like I don't think that that means that they don't have the chops, right? Like I think they're creative, identity as a studio is totally shown with the work they did on Skylanders and how much that succeeded, right? So like to me, they talked about like new gameplay experiences. I mean, they proved that they could do that, right? Like they created a whole genre of game that blew up and made a ton of money until it went away, right? But like they started that trend, so I totally believe that they have the capability of like being a bigger force in the industry overall if they have another idea like that in them, and who's to say they don't. I think the other thing is that unless I think if they make a flop that sells poorly and reviews really poorly, that's where they're in trouble. Because I think if they make
Yes.
a game that is critically well received but sells really poorly, then you go you hey Microsoft, you want to buy us? Like, I feel
Yeah.
like that totally could happen, like easily. If times get rough and it comes to okay, the studio's in trouble, right? Especially if they're working on games with Microsoft that Microsoft is depending on getting finished. I mean, I feel like you have a pretty good I feel like it seems low risk to me. Like obviously going independent is inherently high risk, but your studio could get closed at any time too, right? Like we've seen that happen even when you're owned by a safe quote unquote, right? Like Sony just closed down London studio because their plans changed, right? Like
Yeah, and Fire Sprite's downsizing.
could
I've seen
happen
on the
anytime.
yeah.
So the idea of being like, we're gonna go independent, we're gonna try to take our destiny into our own hands, and if things go south, we've maintained a close relationship with Microsoft, who could potentially bring us in house and not be under Activision Blizzard, be under Microsoft. And, maybe that's better for them. I don't know.
If 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 Toys for Bob was to sort of like they've got independent now, if Microsoft were to buy them, would it be different to if Active Bliz King owned them? I've really pop and that into one there. If they so like they own them currently,
Mhm.
and then they leave Active Bliz King owned by Microsoft, and if they go back directly under Microsoft without being under Active Bliz King, do they have more freedom at that point, or do
I
No,
they
I
would
just
say
don't
keep it
yeah.
in
I
the?
don't think it matters, does it? Like,
I think it
isn't the
does.
new
'Cause-
corporate structure that
Does it
basically they
flatten
all
them out,
report to
or it's not
yeah.
not like
So
Bethesda where they own Bethesda, but Bethesda then everything else is still under Bethesda. They're not
that's
necessarily
That
under
changed
Xbox.
since they kind of restructured and Sarah Bond's, like, head of kind of all the studios, right?
right. But I think you have
I
to
need a chart. I
wonder,
need a bracket pretty
you have to
urgently.
wonder like how, okay. So I think on paper, it shouldn't be different, right? Like, I think, like, in terms of how it works in the flow chart or whatever, like, sure, you can argue that it's different, but, like, or that it's not different, but it absolutely is different, right? Who you're answering to is different. What other projects your parent company is responsible for are different, right? The companies that are like Xbox game studios report to Xbox games, like, that, uh, arm of the company like directly, right? Whereas like if you're an ABK studio, there are a lot more layers between you and the folks at Xbox. And like, yeah, you're all part of the same team ostensibly, but like there's a reason that Arcane is still a Bethesda studio and not an Xbox studio, right? Because like there is a degree of separation there. And you saw that in practice when they talked about how, oh, we weren't really checking in on Redfall, and then it kind of came, oh, yeah, came by surprise that it wasn't very good, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I do think there's probably a closer connection between the folks at Xbox proper and a studio like Double Fine, for example. That's speculative, but I think that there is evidence to support that line of thinking. Um, that said, I do think it is structurally different anyway, because like you look at what's happened at Activision Blizzard King, right? Historically, we just talked about how Vicarious Visions was a healthy studio that got spun into a support studio. Toys for Bob, healthy studio, spun into a support studio. I think that if you are removed from the Activision Blizzard King parent, then you're not getting turned into an Activision Blizzard support studio, right? That's just not a thing that happens because you're an independent studio that has a slate of projects with Xbox specifically, not a rung in the Activision Blizzard, you know, um, totem, right? And so I do think it would be different. I don't know, like in terms of, does that mean that they have more creative control or something like that? I guess I don't know about that. That seems like maybe a different question because like what the status quo is right now is obviously going to be different than 5 years from now as Xbox changes things there. Um, but I do think I would argue that it secures your identity as a studio if you get bought under the Xbox umbrella, not one of the other parent companies that could easily spin you into another team and make you a part of, oh, you're working on Blizzard games now.
Yeah, I like to think that that risk would be kind of negated now they're owned by Microsoft, but maybe not. We've seen with Redfall that it was a bit of a disaster. I hope that they're changing their approach. But the last time Toys for Bob was indie was in the 2000s, and they made Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure. So if they can replicate that success for me, I'll be very, very happy.
See, proven track record. What am I? So
Yeah,
exactly what I'm talking
that was
about.
that was the last game they made as an indie before they started working on crappy IP games like Madagascar and Madagascar Escape to Africa.
Yeah, but then
Yeah.
after that era, they made Skylanders.
Skylanders.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like that's an Activision problem, right? There was an era where Activision was they were like, yeah, we're the company that makes these crappy tie-in games because
Mhm.
that's a market, right? So we'll see. I'm happy for them. I'm glad. I mean, obviously, it's preferable to seeing them get absorbed, right? Or I'm sorry, dissolved. And I think based on the fact that they are going to have this relationship with Xbox, they made a little cheeky joke about keep your horns and your eyes out for more. Maybe that's a Spyro reference, right?
That
Um,
sounds like he does have horns and he has eyes. That is
Exactly. So to me, it's like I feel like this could be the best of both worlds, where hopefully we get the projects we wanted to see from them with Xbox, and then they're free as a studio to kind of go out and seek other opportunities, and hopefully that works out for them because I think that they are definitely like a studio that adds a lot to the industry, right? There's not a lot of studios that make the kind of games that they make, and I would love to see them have the ability to like grow and expand and make more teams and have more active projects at a time, because getting to see them do like have a team that's working on a new Spyro game, have a team that's maybe doing another like a remake of Banjo and then working on a new IP and like that would be exciting. I think that would be really additive, not just for, Xbox's portfolio, but just for the landscape in general to have companies other than Nintendo investing in this kind of game on like a double A to triple A level.
yes. Sorry, was that the end? I didn't realize the end of a thought. Sorry.
Well, it's funny because I
Sorry.
I I was like, "Okay," and then I saw the 2 of you, like, looking back and forth. It's like, "You gonna say anything? Or is it you?" And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, I guess that's time
Sorry.
for the plugs."
Apologize.
Well, guess what? We got some more good news for you in just a minute, but before we get into that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of March. For the first time, they are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobe, Snack It Go, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go and show your support just like they did, if you want to write in with your thoughts about Toys for Bob going independent, the other stuff we're going to talk about this week, your own main topic, or any of the other stuff that we talk about on this show, you can do that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games, where you can find links to our Patreon, where you can get a bunch of perks and goodies and show your support. You can find our Discord, where you can keep the conversation rolling between episodes, or you can write into the question block and get your thoughts read on the air. However you choose to get involved and show your support. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast. Okay, we're back, boys.
Let's see. That's more good news.
More good news.
No bad news yet, no?
No bad news yet.
No? Okay.
We're keeping it clean. We're keeping it clean.
Okay.
Good news, okay?
I feel like I haven't got to complain at all this episode so
Well,
far.
yeah, it's been enough. All right, I listen to you complain all year. Give it a break. Today's positive vibes, okay?
Okay. All
Number
right.
2, Remedy has acquired the full rights to the Control franchise back from 505 Games for $17 million.
Honestly,
Woo!
I thought my
Woohoo!
headline, "Remedy takes control of Control," was way better than what
That is
Games Industry
better.
Biz did.
Remedy
Like,
takes control.
I like that as well.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
they
it's a
did.
shame we didn't use it.
So this is obviously great news to see. Remedy has reacquired the rights to the Control franchise back from their publishing partner 505 Games. They basically what happened here is they gave them the amount that 505 has invested into Control back. So whatever I guess profit that 505 has made is pocketed, and now they kind of got their investment back from for that.
yeah, so it's specifically the 17 million euros that 505 has put towards the development of Control 2 and Condor, which are 2 games in
And Condor's
contr
the
Multiplayer one.
multiplayer spin-off that they're working on.
Yeah.
so it's good to see. I mean, it's great news for Control, I think, and great news for Remedy. 505 Games must be in serious financial, like, dire
Yeah.
straits to need 17 million euros to give up a whole IP like
Yeah.
Control.
And the fact that Remedy are, currently, I would say, re-peaking. They've peaked, they might have unpeaked, they're peaking again with, with Alan Wake 2. Control 2
Yeah.
looks like it's gonna be great. It's the Alan Wake 2 DLC coming out. They're working on the Max Payne stuff. Remedy really are just, like, hitting all the right notes right now.
Yeah.
They managed to convince Rockstar to let them do, Max Payne 1 and 2.
I think they're showing how you be a lean, mean AAA studio and survive in these harsh times of
Mhm.
making really, really smart development decisions and making the right publishing partnerships here, right, with studios that you can really work with. Um, they did talk about how 505 was doing this as part of a restructuring that they're looking to narrow the amount of studios they work with and focus more on IP that they own wholesale that they think has a
Mhm.
broad, broad reaching application. But as Steve has added here, the day after this was announced, they closed a bunch of offices. So it doesn't seem like they're in a great position right now.
What else
Um,
did they do,
Yeah, they
505?
also announced
Oh,
in November they were laying off 30% of its staff.
yeah,
yeah,
So
struggling.
they're not in a good place. They're saying that the market's evolved since the pandemic and
yeah.
blah blah blah. They,
They've already released 3
obviously
Translation,
games
struggling.
this year.
they didn't invest any of the money they made during the boom well, and now they're struggling, like most of these companies are,
Yeah.
because they don't have any foresight, because there's no reason for them to, because of how the law works. Anyway, so the
Sorry, a minute ago I said they released 2 games. They didn't. They released 1 game and 2 DLCs, but they're still pumping stuff out for how they're struggling.
Yeah, but if
Um,
those games aren't giving them the kind of investment they need back,
yeah,
and then what do they do with games moving forward? If you can get 17 million euros back from Remedy, and then put that money in another game that's going to come out a lot sooner, because I'd imagine Control 2 and Condor a little further down the line, and
yeah.
potentially get that money rolling again.
yeah, that's probably
They're
why,
obviously
right?
kind of, yeah, they're probably cash strapped at the moment, which is why they're closing offices down and selling off rights to games.
So it's also worth pointing out there are a couple other little wrinkles here. 505 is going to keep being the publisher of Control until the end of this year. At that point, Remedy will have the opportunity to look for a different publishing partner or to self-publish the game, or I guess to continue with 505, but that seems unlikely.
Oh,
And
they go with Epic again, won't they? There was a phenomenal success with Alan Wake 2.
I guess it
Mm,
depends, right? Because it's I don't know if there's as much value for that from Epic's perspective, but I mean, maybe, right? It's already in other places. So it's you know what I mean? You can't make
yeah.
the Epic Store exclusive the way that you could with Alan Wake 2, which is I think why they get in bed with
I think
studios
they
like that.
could. They could take it off of Steam like they did
But
with,
it was
when they
already
bought.
on. Sorry, it was an Epic exclusive when it first came out, the game. Took a year and a bit. It's only recently come to Steam sort of with the Control Ultimate Edition, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. It was spent like the first year of its life, possibly more, because I had to buy it on Epic. I got to it late, had to get it on Epic, didn't come on Steam for a little while later, which I think was still 2020 at that point. So
Yeah.
they
I
they
mean, I guess
clearly
you could
had a
remake it
partnership
again.
anyway. But, yeah, it could be like Control 2 could be an Epic exclusive.
That I think that I could see, or Condor as well, right? That would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
But I
I
guess it
also
I guess it depends on whether or not maybe that relationship is so strong that Epic is like, yeah, sure, right?
Mhm. I also wonder if Control 2 is less of a risk than Alan Wake 2 was. Alan Wake 2 was like, they struggled to get off the ground, no one really wanted it.
Control
It
2
was
is
an
a
Epic
sequel to
exclusive.
a Game of the Year candidate.
Yeah, a game that sort of did quite well for itself, had a sort of a couple of versions of it. It's maybe not as well known as Alan Wake in terms of like if you say Alan Wake, people are like, "Oh, I remember that game." Whereas Control maybe is a bit more of an underlier that way, but I still think it's sold very well. It's probably less
That's
of a
the
risk.
thing too, though, like, 2s are usually where a franchise pops off,
Mhm.
right? Like, it's like the first one did well, it won Game of the Year at a few places, it got a lot of attention, the second one comes out and it gets good reviews, like, that's gonna be the game that people same thing happened with Alan Wake,
Unless you're
right?
Elder Scrolls, then it really pops up on 5. GTA was 3, so I guess maybe some
Yeah.
of them you gotta keep making a few.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's also like that's like saying that the games that came before it weren't a success, right? Because it's like Morrowind and Oblivion were also really big hits.
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah,
Skyrim
yeah,
was
but
like
that was 3
fucking
and 4
Titanic,
again, you know?
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. But I'm thinking more like you see that a lot with like that was like the case with like Mass Effect, right? Like the first one was like, oh, what a cult game, 2 massive hit, right? Like that's the one that breaks out, you know. Um, but obviously there's plenty of examples where I guess it's a few later or whatever. But I wouldn't be surprised if Control 2 is a much, much bigger hit than the first game was, even though the first game was very successful.
I
Just
think
because
having Alan well, like, by that point, you're gonna have Alan Wake, people that have maybe got into Alan Wake with Alan Wake 2 and, seen how that sort of connects to Control. You've had a few years at this point to sort of build up more of a fan base that people are especially because it was on PS Plus, it came to Games
I
Pass,
mean,
it's coming to
they're
Games
gonna
Pass.
re-release it too, right? Like, it's about to get a new release with whatever, whether it's self-published or whatever, and I'm sure they'll do some kind of, "Here's an event, here's it has another moment," right? Like,
Yeah, so it
maybe you just
all,
put it on sale for a couple months, right? Like, I think all those are things you could use to kinda give it another charge too.
yeah,
Give it
well,
away.
what I'm
Freebie with Alan Wake.
Yeah, well, they did that with Alan Wake Remastered, but
Yeah,
the fact that it's been on sorry, what I'm trying to say. The fact that it's been on PS Plus, it's now on Games Pass as of this month. When Control 2 comes out, that's a huge audience that has not bought the game, but is now ready and primed for the second one.
for sure.
And now there's an obvious definite connection to Alan Wake with Alan Wake 2, spoiler alert. Um, that's gonna sort of tie into it, especially if the DLCs where the Control DLC tied into Alan Wake, the Alan Wake DLCs might tie back into Control, you know?
I wonder what the deal was because you said it just came to Game Pass, right? It was, like, just this month, or was it last month?
So what was that, sorry? Control
Control?
came
It
to Game Pass?
just
It
came to Game Pass, right?
just came to Game Pass, like, it might not even be out yet, but it's in March. It's happening in March.
Okay.
Whether it's already there or not, I
So
don't know, but
I wonder if that did 505 make that deal or because then
good question.
is I wonder how that works. Like, did 505 do they get a payout? Because again, like they own it until the end of this year anyway. Is that going to revert next year and then Remedy can re-sign it and make more money? Is Microsoft going to be interested in doing that? I don't know. That's an
I
I don't
don't know
know
enough
how
about the
contracts work. That's interesting to me though.
yeah, I don't know
Um,
enough about the Game Pass, contracts for that really.
One other thing that I do wanna call out, that I thought was interesting was Remedy also pointed out that because of quote unquote "certain receivables," the actual amount that it's gonna pay is gonna be less than that. So I think they really made out here. Like, they got the investment they needed to get Control made, establish it as a franchise. They got some investment in the sequel and a spinoff, and now they're gonna walk away owning the IP like scot free. Like, what an absolute W for them. Awesome. And to your point, Max, right? Like coming high, like riding high off of Alan Wake 2 release. They're about to go back to one of their other classic franchises and probably knock it out of the park. Like, I feel like they can't lose right now. It's great to see. And again, as an independent, like triple A studio, really cool to see them, trailblazing out here, doing their thing, succeeding.
Fair fucks to them. I'm such a big fan of what Remedy has been doing and what they are doing, and the fact they've got so much in the works that's all very exciting stuff. Maybe Condor's a bit of an unknown element, but yeah, Control 2, bang. Alan Wake 2 DLC, bang. Um, the remasters of Max Payne 1 and 2 into one game, bang. Like you know, they're just on their upward trajectory again after, Control sort of put them back up and Alan Wake 2 has put them back up. They're just still rising. Fair fucks.
Feels like they can't miss right now. Yeah, like you hope that they can take that money and reinvest in more talent, expand the studio, work on more projects. Because I mean, it's
Mhm.
like they went from being a studio that could like barely get one game made to now they've got 3 big projects in active development at a time. Like that's really cool.
Yep.
So you
Pay
hope that trend continues.
Yeah, they can pay Matthew Peretta whatever he's worth to get him to do every character in all of the games. That's important.
All right, so let's close things out with for the day on our last topic. This one is 50-50. It's 50% definitely good, 50% hopeful, we'll say.
Yeah. It's 50 it's also, yeah, go on, carry on, actually. I need to work out what the word is before I say it, so you carry on.
All right, you work on your bit. You work on your bit, Max.
Go on.
So here's where we're at. We have two stories this week about Embracer Group selling off studios instead of closing them amid their ongoing financial, uh, burnout.
Meltdown, absolute
Meltdown,
meltdown.
sure. Yeah, great. There you go. I was like, I can't think of a word catastrophic enough to describe this, but I think a nuclear explosion sounds pretty good. So
The
Saber
word
and
I was thinking of was Schadenfreude, because that's how I feel hearing about last year, Embracer buying, Embracer buying, Embracer buying, doing nothing. Now, Embracer selling. Hoo boy.
So here's the thing, Max. You missed my little rant last week about layoffs and how it's the fault of bad business practices. This is another great example of business school brain where you spend a shit ton of money while rates are low, and then oh no, we have no product to sell. Let's
Yeah,
lay a bunch of people off and liquidate all our assets and sell them for less than we paid for. That's good business, though, right?
yeah. Too
Okay.
much
Yeah,
too much
yeah. I
sewing.
mean, the buyback of Saber for $500 million, right? Is great. But I feel like that's the one company in their roster that doesn't really have much IP that many people care about that they own. Like they own like Mud Runner and Snow Runner, and that's about it. That's their own
Yeah.
IP, and everything
Well,
else is licensed.
Yeah,
Space Marine 2.
yeah,
Space Marine
I
well,
know
they
2.
that's
don't own that
licensed.
though. Yeah, they license that from Games Workshop.
Good point. Yeah, fair.
Yeah, but that's all well and good, Steve. But let's not bury the lead here. They bought the studio. The studio bought itself back with with equity from a private investor group for $500 million, like you said. Saber bought them for $525 million. So they sold them for $25 million less at a time where inflation is worse. So they lost money unequivocally.
Thanks
I
for
wonder
the
if they
good news.
retain any ownership of any of the IP, or if
What IP?
they're
You just said they owned two IP. All the other games they're working
yeah,
on are licensed.
I
And they
know it's
they
crazy.
literally like all the games that they're putting out, they're taking them with them. So obviously like the licenses go with the studio. So
Mhm.
This is great news. This is all good news.
because they don't own these licenses, right? They're just I mean, maybe they own them for now for a certain amount of time. It's like when EA was making Star Wars games, right? They don't own Star Wars. They just are
Yeah.
the studio being licensed to work on them. But yeah, it's like
Well,
these are the games they have coming up, right? They have Expeditions, a Mud Runner game, right? Like you said, that's an IP they own. John Carpenter's Toxic Commando, licensed. Warhammer 40K, Space Marine 2, licensed.
technically not licensed. I actually don't think that's based on an existing IP. I think that is an IP inspired by John Carpenter stuff. I don't think that actually is an actual. I don't think it is actually like. I don't think Toxic Commanders is a thing that exists. I think this is
Yeah,
this
but
is.
the John
Oh,
Carpenter name's gonna be licensed, isn't
but
it?
he
Yeah, I
worked with
agree.
them to
Yeah,
make the IP,
I
right?
think so. Yeah,
I think
yeah. But I
that's
do think
right.
that they must have part ownership in it. I don't think it's entirely him. I think it's like Tom Clancy's. At the top of it. That
I
sort of.
Yeah.
forget the story there quite, but either way,
Ah, it's too much for me.
it's an IP that they're partnering on. It's not
Yeah.
something that they own.
Mhm.
I would imagine it's even if they have a stake in it. Um, and point being, none of that's staying with Embracer. So Embracer bought them high and sold them low. Is
Yeah, it
the
was a
take?
weird buy for them. Weird buy, because like I get that whole business model was we buy all this IP, right? We own it, and then if you want to use it, you come to us. Like, owning. I still don't like.
I don't think that was the plan. I think the plan was to buy. I
Yeah,
think
maybe, but
I think
like
we
I don't know.
ascribed that to it of like, oh, clearly that's what they're doing. I don't
It
know.
seemed like a good model, right? You buy Dark Horse Media, you own all the comic books, you buy Asmodee, you own all of the board games, and then you can do other things with them. Like it made sense. Like buy
You have to do
Crystal
things.
Dynamics, and then
Have
you
to do
can
things
use
though. You
Tomb
can't just
Raider. Yeah,
endlessly write checks.
yeah.
And again, and buy stuff with like very, very like a very wide range of value, right? Of like, oh, we own the rights to the Lord of the Rings being licensed. Okay, that's very valuable. Tomb Raider,
Mhm.
that's very. But then it's also like they bought like how many of these indie studios? And then
Yeah,
just
Coffee
close them all
Stain, like,
down.
let's do Goat Simulator, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, great. Now you own this IP that was only valuable because of the studio that was making it. Like it's worthless now. It's not like
Which
IP that anybody cares about like that. It's just you just own it. It's just a line item in your portfolio. It's like when EA was buying like little studios and then closing them down. It's like, cool, we own, what was it, that dungeon franchise that they own, that like PC classic. You
You
know
mean
the one.
Bullfrog? Come on, man. Like they they did like Dungeon Keeper,
Dungeon
Theme
Keeper.
Park,
Thank
Team
you.
Hearts
Yeah.
Golden. They did Bullfrog was an absolute classic studio.
That's what I'm
I mean,
saying, though. Like, they bought a studio that made these cool, small
yeah.
niche games and closed them down, and then it's like, you own this
No,
IP, and to what end? Like, you didn't
Bull
do anything with it, you just own it now. And, like, that's what Embracer is. They just own a bunch of shit, but they have no ability to put out product, it seems, Or at least
what
product
who
that can, have a return enough to
which
justify how much they've spent.
which one of you two said on last year's predictions that Embracer Group
That was
one
me.
of an
They
yeah
would have a game of the year. I thought just
yeah
simply because of the law of averages, Max, they own so many studios. Surely one of them would put out a game.
mm,
I believe none of us had 2 studios buy themselves out in a
yeah
single week
yeah.
on our predictions, yeah.
That doesn't happen that often. It's like
No.
I mean, maybe it's a new trend. We'll see, right? But wild.
I mean, if you could save jobs by, well, we're gonna close the studio down. No, please don't. We'll try and save it, and we go get $500 million from a
An
private
angel
equity
investment.
company to keep it open, it's like, oh, why
Yeah.
not?
I mean, it's great if you can do it.
Yeah. Why couldn't Embracer do it? Why couldn't Embracer get the money?
Because who would invest? Who would invest? It's like remember when we talked about the Microsoft leaks and they had that big matrix of like, these are all the companies we might invest
Oh,
in,
yeah, yeah, the high
and these are
risk
the
ones,
reasons
yeah.
why. Yeah, why the fuck would you invest in Embracer Group, especially now, right? Because look at what they're doing. They're fucking hemorrhaging cash, and now they're selling off assets below what they're worth. This is when you start buying. You don't invest in them before when they're in a massive amount of debt and need a multi-billion-dollar deal to secure the future of the company. And now, we've closed a bunch of the studios that we acquired. So we've massively tanked the value of the company. We own a bunch of IP that are not worth anything because you don't have the people that made them worth anything around to work on them. And the stuff that you do still own is years away from turning anything out. Why the fuck would you spend you either wait until they're so much closer to the drain and then you buy them for nothing, or you wait until they get liquidated and then you buy the parts that you're interested in. That's what's going to happen. 100%. Just like the fucking companies that this whole thing started from. THQ Nordic and all that nonsense, It's like, it's the
Oh,
exact
God,
same
yeah.
cycle all over again,
It
of
is a
like,
mess.
ridiculous, man. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's like so predictable that this was going to happen eventually, that the bubble would burst as soon as any of the conditions under which they spent that much money changed. And like, obviously the fucking cash cow was going to end at some point, and none of these companies planned for it. It's nuts. And then again, Steve, we were just talking about how long ago on Nintendo Noise, right? The massive amount of money that Nintendo's been sitting on, because that's what they've done the last several years, is like, hardware and software sales are at an all-time high. Better keep the price exactly the same, release a bunch of attractive shit, and then sit on it. So that when the market turns, we have a ton of cash. And then they spent time investing in new revenue streams, right? Like movies and theme parks and shit. And now all these other companies were like, oh, you mean people aren't spending the same amount of money they did in 2020 forever? It's like, how did you have no plan beyond spend money forever?
I mean, Embracer had no plan beyond we're gonna go get money from the Saudis, and then when that deal fell through, it was like, "Oh dear, what do we do?" And they just had to, like, renege on a bunch of deals that they had in the works, and I guess now they're really, really having for money and they're having to sell off their own studios.
Wild to me too, man, because that I'm glad you brought that up, because that financing was supposed to be for $2 billion. That's
Mm.
not even that much compared to what they've spent. They spent $1.3 billion on Gearbox that they're now going to sell. That's spoiler alert. That's the next story we're about to do.
Possibly.
Whoa.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it's like, that's nuts, man. Like, what, you thought that was going to keep you afloat? To do what? To just keep spending money? It's like,
I
I
guess make games. Hope that the Amazon deal with Tomb Raider kind of pays off, you know?
I guess, but, man, it's like you're just stacking deck chairs on the Titanic at this point. The company's already in a free fall. That's a regular turn of phrase, Max. Don't make a face at me.
Okay, I made a face 'cause I've not heard it before, and,
Sorry, organizing deck chairs on the Titanic? That might be the turn of phrase.
I don't know what it is, but we are for a lot of that journey, that was probably a very important job that someone did. Just, feels like that
I
person's
don't know.
Right up until the
Jack
end.
was always messing him
yeah,
up when he's chasing after Rose. It's probably terrible.
that is true, yeah. They got all sweaty and steamy, didn't they, as well?
Terrible.
I like that. So I thought you were reacting because you're like, I've never heard that idiom before, and you're like, that's bullshit. Okay, the guy organizing the chairs had a very important job until the
He was
very
very
end.
important. Yeah, yeah, there was, like there were multiple days of that journey where every day the deck chairs were a mess, and he was like, "Right, time to go and do some hard
Time to
work." And do you
organize
know
the
what?
deck chairs on the Titanic.
I hope he made it out. I hope that
I hope you're
he
right.
was organizing chairs the
I
rest of
hope
his
he's
life.
like that chef that was like really, really drunk and was so drunk that his body like survived the cold. Read that story if you haven't. It's a crazy one.
Okay, I will do.
It's a
You'd
fact.
probably mock him by saying, "Oh, it's like having a cold body as a chef." Blah blah blah. When talking about some failed
I'm
business,
not
I
making
just
fun of him. I think it's awesome. He got done with work for the day and tied one on, and he survived. That kicks ass.
that is cool. That is very cool.
That is awesome.
That is wicked,
Anyway,
actually.
so uh, here's where we're at with the Gearbox story right now because it's still developing. Kotaku has reported that Gearbox is that there's a decision that's been made to sell Gearbox. That's like a kind of thing that's been going on since like September. That there was a rumor that they're going to sell or something. That they might buy themselves back. Like something's going to change, right, with the ownership. And Kotaku understands now from some of their sources who are familiar with what's going on that the deal is now in the late stages of being finalized. We don't know who the buyer is and what exactly is happening, but that they are kind of nearing completion of a deal that will lead to Gearbox being sold and kind of getting out from under the arms of their struggling parent company right now.
Does the IP go with them, do you think? Because
Definitely.
Borderlands is potentially valuable, and they've got the upcoming film coming out later this
Yeah,
year.
there's no way that it doesn't work that way. That's just like how I think like I don't think there's any universe that they walk away without Borderlands. Like that's
Uh,
part of the valuation of the company.
yeah, it's got to be really. I mean, how much did you say it was worth? Is that
So
figure
they were
disclosed?
purchased for $1.3 billion. I don't think they are worth that much, but that's what they were purchased for.
It depends what the Borderlands movie makes. Like,
I
if
was
that
gonna
if that
say,
turns
yeah,
into, like, a valuable franchise in terms of a movie, it's out in August this year.
Yeah,
It's got big actors in,
you think it's
Kate
gonna make $1 billion
Blanchett, Kevin Hart,
though? I
Jamie
don't.
Lee Curtis, yeah, Jack Black's in there. It's like, that could be a really good film,
Could
and
be.
it could potentially turn into a good movie franchise for them.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving it enough credit. But to me that
just
it is selling a little bit of that kind of like, I don't know. Is this going to be a thing? Like, is this going to connect or is this
it
another
does seem a bit weird.
weird, kind of miss when it comes to video game movies? Like, is this going to be like is this a Last of Us or is this a Twisted Metal?
Hmm.
Right?
Do you think that this shows, if anything, that shows how desperate they are? The fact that they're like,
Yes.
"Yeah, this movie's coming out. Shit, get rid of it." And, "Oh, yeah, movie, I don't care, like, just get rid of them now. We need however much they
Yeah.
got from
No,
them." Did they
I
say how
think
much they got?
this is like they have characterized this as like the crown jewel in their portfolio. It's like Gearbox as being the most important thing that they own.
Why?
I mean, because they spent so much money on it, right? Like, I mean,
Honestly, all it is Borderlands. Like, if you look at what they've worked on
Yeah, I'm
and
just
what they've
trying to look that up.
published, it's been mainly misses. They published Godfall, for fuck's sake.
Really? I forgot that game
Like,
existed. You d
yeah,
unlocked
everyone forgot that
strange
game
new
existed
memories
because it
of it.
closed down after about 2 minutes because it was dreadful. No one played it.
Tiny
yeah.
Tina's Wonderland did alright, didn't it?
But again, they
That's
published that.
Borderlands.
They didn't
Borderlands,
make
that
it.
is Borderlands.
I think that's worth pointing out because, like, a lot of Gearbox's, and that's like part of the article that Kotaku published this week. It's like their overall organization has changed since they were acquired, right? Like when they got acquired in 2021, or was it 2021? Yeah, 2021, early 2021. So then later that year, Embracer acquired Perfect World Entertainment and made that Gearbox Publishing, part of Gearbox Publishing, excuse me. Then Gearbox acquired co-developer Lost Boys Interactive in 2022. Then later that same year, that was when Embracer announced that Volition, who had worked on Saints Row, was going to become part of Gearbox. Then that was also they had what, one, two, three, four, I think, rounds of layoffs because there was some of the team that worked on Remnant 2, staff at Cryptic, who works on Neverwinter, and then Volition that got closed earlier, or in the middle of last year, I guess I should say. So it's like Gearbox proper, right? Borderlands is obviously like their biggest thing, but like I think like they do have a good track record. They've made a lot of games that have made a crap load of money. And
They've also
obviously,
made some absolute trash.
Oh
Aliens
yeah.
Colonial Marines. They had a class action lawsuit against Sega that they had to pay out
Hmm.
yeah.
because the game was dreadful.
Yep.
You'll like this, Steve. I've just gone on their website, on their about section of their website. We make the games you love to play. Over the years, Gearbox Software has created some of the most memorable and iconic franchises, characters, and experiences in video game history. Here are a few of the franchises they created from the ground up, and it's two: Borderlands, Brothers in Arms. Now, when was the last time a Brothers in Arms game came out? What's
2008.
Yeah.
it was one game. Was that really one game?
No, they did a lot of Brothers in Arms games. So from
Okay.
2005 to 2008, they released a bunch. I mean, some of those were ports to the DS and the PSP,
Yeah.
but they did like 5 Brothers in Arms games. But this was
Next.
the era when Call of Duty was a like World War
Oh
II
yeah.
game, and
Yeah.
and Medal of
No,
Honor was
2008.
huge.
2008. 2005 was uh, COD 4, wasn't it? That was 2005, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, but it was around that period of time when they were all single player titles, really. Like, they start making it in 2003 or whatever. It comes out in 2005.
So
It would have
kinda
been
it
complete.
it was, like, hot during the era of single player games like
Yeah.
that, and then as it moved to multiplayer, I mean, that was when Borderlands became a thing, and they kinda
Hmm.
moved on to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like the Borderlands franchise is enormous, right? Like, it is worth a lot of money for sure, right? They're making it a movie, like, that IP definitely has value. They're not worth $1.3 billion. They're just not, right? But that's the thing. Like they overpay for stuff. That's like been their whole thing is just writing these checks. I don't think whoever is buying this I don't think they're paying $1 billion for Gearbox. I just don't see that. And I think if Gearbox is buying themselves from them, I don't think it's for $1 billion, you know?
You
No,
think
me
there's some
neither.
dodgy going on?
No, I think it's just Embracer Group like had a culture of buying to buy and buying high. And I think that that is coming home to bite them in the ass because like the environment in which they were able to do that doesn't exist anymore. Interest rates are not as low as they were. It's harder to borrow money than it was, and like making these kinds of large like unwieldy acquisitions like this is just not as easy to do now as it was when they kind of spun up and started doing all this shit. And I think it's just clear that it was unsustainable and they didn't really have a plan in place aside from amassing stuff and continuing to get funding until they had a hit. And
Yeah.
the hit never came and the
Never
funding
came.
stopped coming. And now we're where we're at. And unfortunately, I think the other stuff that you see in this article from Kotaku is that like in the meantime, it's led to a lot of problems at Gearbox, right? Like there's mention of a kind of a lack of faith in leadership, specifically, Randy Pitchford being kind of the face of the company, but
He's gone now, isn't he? Or is he still
no,
there?
he's still there. Um,
Good God. I thought he was busy. He bought the fucking magic castle. I thought he was over there, like, doing his magic tricks. I
but
mean, he's not been great ever since the USB incident. That wasn't a good look for Randy Pitchford, was
no,
it?
and that's the thing is
Oh,
like I think he's
yeah.
he's like
How'd
and
he get away with that?
I mean, what do you mean? Is he going-
Wasn't there something, like, dodgy
He's
on
a
the
rich white
USB?
guy. What do you mean?
Yeah,
How did he get
exactly. But
away
he's a
Yeah,
rich
with
white
alright.
guy. He has tons of money, and of course
Alright.
he got away with it. What do you mean? It's we
Fair enough.
remember how there was like that very credible thing about how Bobby Kotick like threatened a person that he worked for that he was gonna fucking have them killed. He nothing happened from that, but it's like, yeah, whatever, right? Like, he's rich, it's fine.
That's not cool, is it, actually?
No, it's
That's
not.
not cool.
It's real
I was
bad.
just I was laughing so much reading Randy Pitchford's Wikipedia page. If you want a good laugh, I think it's funny. Just the personal life section,
Personal life.
all it says is
I
Pitchford.
love reading a motherfucker's personal
Me
life
too.
section on Wikipedia, Steve.
He's got a whole section on litigation about the whole USB incident, but personal life is just one line. It says, "Pitchford has a son." That's
Pitchford
it.
has a
There's
son.
nothing else. Pitchford has a son, and that is it.
I don't speak. So
Wow.
so here's to put a pin on this part of it, right? Um Basically, when Embracer announced that they were going to be making massive cuts to their, their worldwide portfolio, uh, Pitchford told the folks at Gearbox that it wouldn't result in major layoffs there. It did. Dozens of people were let go between recruiting, HR, and other like operations type jobs, and that has led to a bunch of freezes on pay raises and hiring. So there's been a problem where folks that are there are not getting uh, adequate pay, and they're not hiring new talent. So like there has been there's a quote here from an anonymous member of their team who spoke to Kotaku, who said, "I've personally been looking for other roles elsewhere, not just due to the Embracer layoff fears, but due to pay." Let me see. Vague and in a holding pattern is definitely par for the course at the moment and has been for most of 2023. And there was another quote from yet another developer who said that they have lost senior members of staff because of some of these issues with pay, and that just in general there's been some other like issues like creatively that have come from this because of mandates from top down to shift focus on certain things as the company was starting to struggle to make money. So they shelved a project that was like some new IP and things that they were like excited to be working on and had been in development for a while, and to put all of their focus on making Borderlands games, unsurprisingly. And there was some kind of like shuffling of leadership on Borderlands 3, which is like extended the timeline on that. There's also a sequel to Tiny Tina's Wonderland that is in development, but that also had a soft reboot, according to their sources. So like everyone who spoke about those said that all those projects are still in development and that they're like they look good and that they're not projects that are suffering, but they are just not, they're not moving along as quickly as they're supposed to be for the reasons that we outlined above, right? The future of the studio is uncertain right now, and it's led to them not doing a good job of maintaining or developing new talent. And that's obviously going to lead to, setbacks in and of itself, let alone if you run into any unique problems. So, there's kind of this tough spot they're in right now where it's like, it seems like they might be able to be lucky like Saber and buy themselves back or be able to move on to a new, more stable parent company. But in the meantime, it's leading to a real problem, I think, in the from the sounds of it, in like the culture of the company and right, like the um confidence in leadership, which if you're losing senior staff and stuff like that, like that's how the beginning of the end starts, right? That's how the next game does become a flop, and then even the stuff that you've been banking on, the Borderlands and stuff of the world, um, that's how those things start to struggle, and you worry that maybe that's the path they're going down, if all this stuff is happening. But hopefully, it's not too late for them to you know change their fortunes a little bit here.
I, I mean, I don't know. I always struggle when a studio is just they've really got one valuable thing, and I think it's just Borderlands. Really, I mean, that was the same problem with Bungie, right? It was like Destiny was their value. Destiny stops being valuable, and then you see what happens. It's like it's just the fortunes of the company kind of dwindle. We've all constantly said that that was a bad purchase for Sony. I can't imagine anyone thinking that Gearbox was a great purchase for Embracer unless the movie and the TV show that they've got in the works turns out to be a really good purchase for them. But presumably that goes when Gearbox goes and they reap the rewards of that. So I don't know. I mean, I would imagine there's been a lot of money invested into that movie and that TV show to kind of get it across the line, along with funneling cash into a studio that's delaying games and not really putting much out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing though, right? Like they've been kind of like forcing the studio to evolve into like they're becoming a publisher as much as they were a developer. And it's like that's not really like what they that's not
Known
really their
for.
history, right? So it's
Mhm.
like I don't know, like it feels like they're a studio that's having an identity crisis right now. And hopefully they're able to land the ship because I mean, I think regardless of how you feel about Gearbox, like I'm not a Borderlands fan myself. But man, I mean, it would be really, really, really bad to see another big independent, I mean, soon to maybe be independent, I should say, AAA studio like this, like close down or see layoffs because of delayed projects or things that are unsuccessful or whatever. Because I mean, Jesus Christ, man, like how many more of those rounds of layoffs can we take before, you know, we just see a massive talent drain, right? And like that's what you worry about.
Yeah.
This year's gonna be like the fact that it's just turned March and we're already on like our 4th major layoffs or sort of the year. This is gonna be a rough year. I wasn't on last week's episode, so I get to say that for the first time, like I've invented that phrase.
But I
This
think
is gonna be a rough
positive,
year.
Max. Look at all the good things this week, you know? Beloved Studios going independent.
That
Independent.
is
Ten
good. That is
That's
good.
the future. Support the
Yeah,
studios you like. Buy their games. Go buy merch if they have it. I guess I don't know. Support them.
spoil their games. There is a lot to be excited about in this year.
There is. There is.
Yeah.
It, I think the unfortunate thing is that after a time of boom, right, there is often a period of contraction. And the games industry just had a boom, right? That has gone on for like 4 years. And I think now we're at a point where like the industry is going to contract again. And a lot of the companies that made a ton of money are, some of them are going to fall away and some of them are going to merge. And, we're going to go through this same cycle of death and rebirth that happens in every industry. And, the fear is just, for me, is do all these layoffs lead to people leaving the industry, right? Because that's where I think you get into trouble. If companies, rise and fall at the end of the day, it's like it's all different names on the box, right? Like that happens. But it's seeing thousands of people be dissuaded from making games for a living that leads to us having less good games to play and less choice when it comes time to purchase. And like that's what you worry about. But you know, um, I think, like Steve said, there's a lot to look at this week that I think is positive stuff, and hopefully, seeing trends like this continue, where like studios that do have strong IP library and that have you know invested talent, right? That is there for the long haul, can hopefully, take the reins back to their future and hopefully, uh, get us away from some of the consolidation that we've seen in the last couple of years, right? And,
Long tail, baby, long tail.
exactly, exactly. Video games are here to stay, so you gotta be thinking long haul.
Yeah, boy.
All right, gang. So if you want to write in and let us know what you thought about today's topics, make sure you write in all the ways that you can by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can join our Patreon and get the show early with a bunch of other perks and goodies. You can write into the show. You can join the Discord and keep the conversation rolling between episodes. Or you can just meet some other folks in the community who like games just as much as you do. We got a nice, fun, inclusive place for you to come and chat games over on the Discord. So, however you choose to get involved, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.